excited because I've had a passion project for about 3 years, ever since joining Microsoft, coming over from Xamarin, to simplify mobile development for all of our C#, F# and .NET developers. And it all came together this year in something that we call Xamarin Essentials. That's just the fancy name, but at the core, you can sort of start to think of Xamarin as all of these amazing cross-platform APIs to start building native iOS, Android, Mac, Windows applications with shared user interface, shared .NET business logic, and access to native APIs all from your shared code. That's our vision. You learn an API once, and you can do everything in the platforms. So what I'm going to do, since I only have 20 minutes of time, is tell you a little bit today about Xamarin Essentials, why it's so important to me, and why I think you're absolutely going to love it. So if you don't know who I am, I'm James Montemagno. I'm a principal program manager at Microsoft for all of our mobile developer tools from end to end. Anything in the mobile development ecosystem, that's what I do. I came over from working at Xamarin through the acquisition, and I was a customer of Xamarin before that. I've been a mobile developer for over 7 years, shipping more than 60 apps across iOS, Android, and Windows platforms, and I simply just love it, which is why I continue to not only present all the stuff that I love to help the next generation of mobile developers be more productive, but sit and listen to how I can now at Microsoft make your lives better every single day. So come up to me, ask me questions. I'm here because my entire job is to sit and listen, to be honest, and take that back to our engineering team so we can build better products for you. Well, let's first talk about Xamarin and Xamarin Essentials. Where does it fit in? If, James, you're saying everything is Xamarin, why is it called Xamarin Essentials, and what the heck is it? Well, if you think of Xamarin in a nutshell, what we did is we put the ability to run your C#, .NET business logic on iOS and Android devices at its core level. That's all your models, view models, RESTful service calls, Azure integrations. Things are the same across each platform. And then what we did is we enabled you to get access to every single native API inside of iOS, Android, and Windows. Inside of C#, but accessing all of the native iOS and Android and Windows APIs. So you kind of had like your UI layer up top, the native APIs when you needed to use them, and then your shared code. So this was great because you always had that escape out that you never had to go write Objective-C, Swift, or Java. We bound every single API in iOS and Android in C# so you could get access to it right away. So if there is something you could do in those native languages, you could do it in C# with C# features. Now, the problem here is that when you wanted to access these APIs from shared code, well, there's no API for that. If it's not in .NET, because you need to access iOS or Android APIs like geolocation or key store, or even the preferences, they don't exist. So that means you're going to have to go learn an iOS API, an Android API, and a Windows API, and a .NET Core API, and whatever else you need to develop for. So now this means that you're writing an interface probably to go off and do something like get and set preferences, and then go write a little bit of C# code under the hood to use NS user defaults, shared preferences, and app data. That's not the worst thing in the world, but now I have to maintain this interface. I need to ensure that my services that I'm registering it are working correct, and I need to make sure that I've written the correct iOS and Android code. So you kind of go through this, dependency service, and you get the interface, and you get the implementation, and you're like, all right, this is fine for 1 or 2 things. And then you start writing some more code, your apps get more advanced, iOS, Android start to get more APIs, and you're like, I got 180 interfaces in my application, and I'm registering this, and is this good for performance? It's not. So you're going through all these things, but you're like, it's okay. I have access to native APIs. So we said, well, let's look at the issues here. We know the great part is that you have access to native APIs, but now you have to learn multiple APIs. You got all this interface overhead. You have to maintain across all these platforms. Another platform comes up, you got to go implement. iOS or Android makes changes, you got to go and update your APIs. And then of course, if you go off and start using third-party libraries out there to do this, then we call this assembly overhead. Now, this is one thing that I really wanted to solve with Xamarin Essentials, because what you don't realize if you start to pull in all these NuGet packages to solve every little problem, The problem here is that when you load your application, especially on Android, you're going to have some startup costs associated with that. If you're running some IOC container that's going out and inspecting all your DLLs. But we want our apps to start super quick. So we said, let's solve that. Let's give all of our developers access to core cross-platform native features from a single API. And that's what we call Xamarin Essentials. We surveyed all of our developers and say, hey, what features are you using? What are you integrating into your application? What APIs do you have interfaces for today? And I was easily able to create a top list. I just went and looked at all my apps. And I was like, yep, I'm using Clipboard here. I'm using the phone dialer here. I need access to the app information, device information. I'm creating a Compass application. Who doesn't need access to connectivity? Am I connected to the internet? I don't know. Let's figure it out. Access to the file system, vibration, all these important things that our applications need. Because we want to write those native applications. We're already worried about the UI. Why do I have to be worried about all of these platform-specific implementations? So what I figured I'd do, since I don't have that much time, is just jump into a demo and get it running. So I have this application here for iOS and Android. It's called my Monkey Finder application. Now, if we go over into this structure, we can see I have Android, iOS, Windows. It's a Xamarin Forms application. The beautiful part here is that this works in any application, whether it's Xamarin Forms or not. Now, the application as of today goes off to the internet, pulls out a bunch of monkeys from a list, and displays them. This is the core of every great application. If you don't have a list of monkeys in your app, then it's not a great mobile app. That's just the standard that Apple uses for their approval process. So it's true. But, you know, there's a few things that I wanted to do here. One, if I go offline, I probably need to not try to query my backend or handle exceptions and maybe pop up a dialog. And also, I want to, at any time, since I created this app for me, I wanted to ensure that wherever I travel in the world, I could find the closest breed of monkeys to me. And this was pretty important. I was just in Bali on holiday. And there was all sorts of monkey temples, and half of my holiday was just hanging out with monkeys. It was quite great. I highly recommend it. But I didn't know, right? I didn't know what types of monkeys these were. So that's where my Monkey Finder app could come in. So I could ideally find my closest location, get some information there. So let's go ahead and implement that inside of here. I'll first walk through the app because it's not too crazy complex. The first thing that we'll see here is I have a data binding to this monkey's view model. Oops, that's really slow. That's really big. So I have the code that's referenced here, my monkey's view model, which is my code behind. I have a list of monkeys, and I have a few commands called get monkeys command, get closest command. And down in here, I just have a list view. So here's my list view of monkeys that are coming in. If I pull to refresh, it gets the monkeys again. I have some circle images, because everyone needs to have circle images. That's what all the cool kids do. And then I just have some buttons. So nothing crazy. I don't think there's any code in my code behind. So, you know, I have one thing for UWP to add a little toolbar. That's it. Everything else is in this data binding. So now what we need to do is we need to first maybe check for connectivity in this application. So what I'm going to do is introduce Xamarin Essentials. So I'm going to go into the documentation, docs.microsoft.com, tap on Xamarin. Now, I want to make a point here that this is the best place to get started in Xamarin in general, whether you want to do iOS, Android, or cross-platform with everything. And since Xamarin Essentials is a library that works on every single platform, when you go through them, you'll see them on every single one, right, that we support. We support iOS, Android, and Windows today. So here I'm just going to, they take you to the same documentation too. So here I'm going to go into Xamarin Essentials. And what's cool here is that it will show me every single API that we support. So I just listed a few of them on that screen. We support a lot more. And the cool part is that Xamarin Essentials is completely open source. So everyone can add new features or request new features. So the first thing we'll do here is we'll go into the Getting Started guide. So the Getting Started guide tells us we support Android, iOS, and UWP. It's really easy to get started. Simply go off, add the Xamarin Essentials NuGet to every single project. You have an API, and then you have implementation in iOS and Android. And then there's a little bit of setup code for Android, nothing for iOS or for iOS or UWP at all. There's just a little bit of code that you need to initialize Xamarin Xamarin Essentials for permissions on Android. It's a special case. So all you have to do besides that is write 2 lines of code in your Android app, and then everything else can be written cross-platform. So now let's say I want to go into connectivity. I tap on connectivity. How great is this? I have a great getting started guide. For all of these, since I wrote all of them myself, I wanted to make sure that if there was anything that was required to put in, that we gave you upfront information when you're implementing an API. So let's say I need access to connectivity. Well, I need to add this permission for the network state. For iOS and Windows, nothing, right? Down here, we have a simple API. Add using Xamarin Essentials, get access to your network information. Access it and see if you have access to the internet. Tell you exactly what each of those enums mean right here in the docs. You can get your connectivity profiles and see if you have Wi-Fi or cellular or anything. You can even register for connectivity changes. Now, what I really love about this is that on every single API, if there's a platform tweak or limitation, we document it right here. You don't need to guess. You don't need to try to go through the source code. It's all right here, and we'll tell you if there's tweaks per platform. Now, what I do love, though, is that we give you access to the API documents right here. As you go right in, we're integrated into the .NET API. It's an essential core API. So I can look at the events, see the connectivity changed event. I can look at the event handlers. I can say, hey, this will throw an exception if you didn't add this permission. Like, we give you this information right here. Same thing on properties. I can get access and take a look through the connectivity profile, tap on one. And we have great documentation for not only the core, but here for every single API that's available. And I also tapped here on the source code because we are completely open source, which means that you can come in and take a look at all of our APIs. So if I go into Essentials, here's every single folder is an API that's available. So when I go into connectivity, I see the Android API is here. I can browse through, look at all of the Android-specific code that I no longer have to write because we did it all for you. So what we can do here is we can come into our Monkey view model. And here I've just, first and foremost, I'll show you here, I have a dependency. I went to NuGet, and I installed Xamarin Essentials. I also added that source code into Android. Here's the packages. Here's Xamarin Essentials. Same thing for iOS. I went in, packages, Xamarin Essentials. So that's where the actual implementation lives in the .NET Standard library, just the reference API. So now what I can do is whenever I come in and say get monkeys async, I could simply say if, and then I can say xamarin.essentials. And I have access right away to every single API that's available there. Boom, 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 boom. Right? There's connectivity. So if I want to, if I can, of course, get rid of that namespace, I'll say connectivity dot network access. And if that does not equal network access dot internet, then I know I don't have internet. So then I can return, and I could do like a pop-up here, pop-up dialog. Literally one line of code checking internet connectivity. Pretty cool. But let's say I want to get access to that geolocation. That must be hard. No, it's not. So let's say I come into here and I say, OK, well, let's get my location. Well, we have a geolocation API built right into Xamarin Essentials. And we give you access to 2 methods. Get last known location or get location async. Get last known location async is a method that will look for the cached location, basically, that's in there. Now, if that doesn't exist, it will return null. And I know that because I read the awesome documentation that I just showed you. So I'll say, oh, if it's not null, or I could do other things like, oh, once I have that location, I could also do or location dot. I get the accuracy, altitude, the course, the latitude, longitude, speed, and even a timestamp. So I'm going to say, oh, only use this if it's in the last hour, for instance. So now what I can do is I can say location. It's null, so I don't have it. I'll say location equals await geolocation dot get location async. Now, it will have some defaults, or I could pass it a new geolocation request here. Okay? This geolocation request. And this request gives me a desired accuracy. So we'll say, I'm just creating this app, just low is fine. And you can see here we document It's the best, high, low, hot, lowest, medium, the meter accuracy there. So we'll just say low. And then we'll give it a timeout, and we'll say time span dot from minutes. We'll just say a minute or so. That'd be good. There we go. And boom. Now I have my location. Okay? So I can say if location equals null again, then we'll return out of there, right? And then what I can do, which is really cool about Xamarin Essentials, is it also gives me a bunch of built-in helper methods on different things. So for instance, here, when I go location dot, I get all of that things. I can also open the maps, open a map application asynchronously, or I could calculate the distance right here between 2 points. So that means that what I could do here, since I have a list of monkeys, I could say monkeys dot order by, and I can say for each monkey, I can get the location of that monkey, and I can calculate, where's it at, dot, oh sorry, I can take my location and find the monkey closest to me. So my location dot calculate distance, and I'll give it a new latitude and longitude. So here we'll say monkey dot latitude, monkey dot longitude, and we'll give it a distance units of miles. Doesn't really matter. And I'll say dot first or default. So just go off and find the first closest monkey to me. That's it. So within a few lines of code, checking location, checking to get the last known location, finding the closest monkey using some built-in helper methods so I don't need to fiddle around with it. And now I can just go ahead and take this application that I just wrote, and I want to zoom out here. There we go. There's my bar. There it is. This will now recompile my application with my code changes that were in. And we should be able to find the closest monkey to us, because each monkey had a latitude and longitude associated with it. So here's my app. It's going to go and relaunch it. There we go. I'm going to search. It's going to go ahead and find it. We don't want that breakpoint there. There we go. I'm going to say go find closest. Now here it's going to go ahead and find my cache location. And it'll ask, hey, do you want to give permission to this app? We handle that for you automatically. Here it doesn't have one, so we're going to go ahead and query it. And of course I didn't add a breakpoint here, so that's good. And let us make sure that we are setting the location. So let's say Apple or something. There we go. And ideally, there we go. We get the latitude, longitude, everything that we would expect, set to the Apple headquarters. And Henry, who's in Phoenix, one of our stuffed monkeys, is boom, ready to go right there. Now I'm totally out of time, so I only have 10 minutes in between. So I'm not going to go ahead and run this yet again over on Android, because it may take a few seconds to deploy, unless it goes really fast. But here I should be able to start without debugging. And the same exact source code will actually run and compile and execute on Android with no code changes under the hood, because Xamarin Essentials is going to handle all of that for me, so I don't have to worry about it. I don't think it'll be fast enough to execute in the last second, but we'll see as I go through the slides and see if we can pop it back up, though it is deploying. So some cool things here. You might be wondering, well, James, there's all of these. It's so excited that it wants to do it. Fine, search. They want to be seen, although something crashed, so that's not good. Oh, yes, I forgot to do the permission in there, so that's good. And in fact, our API is so good that that's what happened. Forgot to add that in there. Let's build without debugging. So you might be wondering, oh, isn't my app going to be huge, right? You have all these APIs. Well, what we did is we built this thing linker safe. We had an advanced linker that shakes away all of the APIs so you don't have to worry about it. And linking will always happen regardless of your link level, besides don't link, because then nothing happens. So we did a case study. I have an app called GeoContacts. There's all sorts of stuff, geolocation, pictures, photos. Look at how excited this application is. Search. Where's my monkeys at? Find. does the same thing, you get it, it's the same thing, it totally works. That's pretty cool. So beforehand, I had 47 assemblies, and my app size was 22.7. But since I swapped out all of my third-party dependencies and all of my source code and used Xamarin Essentials, the same exact application, removing all of that stuff, since this is linker safe, went down to 35 assemblies, which improved my startup time and actually reduced my app size. Because a lot of these third-party dependencies aren't super optimized. We built it to be super optimized so you don't have to worry about it. And in fact, we're so confident in it that we'll be including it in every single template in Visual Studio 2019. So it'll be out of the box, ready to go. And in fact, we have other people in the community already using it, saying, hey, I'm using version tracking, app info, connectivity, vibration, device information, and it only added 30 kilobytes to my actual app size. Pretty amazing. So I'm really actually pleased that actually today, this morning, we went into general availability 1.0. You can get this available today inside of all of your applications. It's available on NuGet. Everything is there. First to hear about it, because I haven't told anyone else. So go get it. Give us your feedback. I think you're absolutely going to be delighted. I also have a session tomorrow called The Future of .NET in Visual Studio, where I'll highlight all of the new stuff in Visual Studio 2019, .NET Core 3, and Xamarin Forms 4.0. So be there tomorrow morning at 9:30. And with that, thank you so much.